A fried chicken millionaire stands on the worst ranch in Blanco County, Texas. Cracked dirt, dead cedar, a creek bed with no creek. The realtors thought he was insane after he'd asked them to find him the most ruined land they had, and they did. There's no water here. Everyone says so. The wells are dry, the spring's gone, the ground shedding rain like a tin roof. So he doesn't drill. He doesn't truck water in. He plants grass and cuts down trees. Years later, clean water runs out of stone that had been dry for a lifetime. How does that work? His name was J. David Bamberger, and in 1969, he did something that made grown ranchers laugh out loud. He had money, real money. He'd helped build Church's Fried Chicken into a chain that stretched across the country, and he could have bought anything. A green ranch with a live creek, a place with good wells and shade trees and grass up to your knees. Instead, he told the land agents to bring him the ugliest, most beaten down, most hopeless piece of hill country they could find. And when he walked it, he was happy. He'd found rock, cedar, bare dirt, gullies where the topsoil used to be, 5,500 acres of ruin. That was the dream. You have to understand what that land looked like to understand why people thought he'd lost his mind. The Texas hill country west of Austin is beautiful from a car window. But under the pretty postcard, a lot of it was sick. Generations of cattle and goats had eaten the grass down to the roots and kept it there. And once the grass was gone, something else moved in. Ash juniper. Locals just call it cedar. Cedar is a scrubby evergreen that hill country ranchers hate with a genuine, personal passion. It grows in dense, dark thickets. It chokes out everything under it. And on Bamberger's new land, it had won. Hillsides were solid green-black with it, so thick you couldn't walk through. The ground underneath was bare as a parking lot. And there was no water. The wells came up dry. The springs that old-timers swore had once run were nothing but damp memories in the rock. So here's the obvious question. If the problem was no water, why on earth would you spend your money on grass and a chainsaw? Why not drill deeper? Why not build a giant tank and haul it in? That's what a rich man is supposed to do, throw resources at the problem until it gives up. Bamberger did the opposite. And to see why, you have to see the thing almost everyone had gotten wrong. The ranch wasn't dying because it stopped raining. Blanco County gets around 30 inches of rain a year. That's not a desert. The rain was falling. It just wasn't staying. Think about what happens to rain when it hits bare, hard-packed dirt with no grass and no soil to speak of. It doesn't soak in. It can't. It sheets off the surface, picks up speed, races down the gullies, and it's gone, off the property, down the creek, out of your life, sometimes in a matter of hours. It takes the last of your topsoil with it. That's the drain. A landscape stripped bare doesn't hold water, it sheds it. The rain wasn't missing, it was leaving. And that changes the whole story. Because if the water is leaving, then drilling a deeper well is like bailing a boat while ignoring the hole. You're chasing the symptom. The real problem was that the land had lost its ability to catch what fell on it for free. So what caught it before? What had this hillside lost? Grass, just grass. Bamberger became obsessed with a single idea, and he'd repeat it to anyone who'd listen for the rest of his life. The answer, he said, was grass, not machines, not money, grass. Here's the mechanism, and it's beautifully simple once you see it. Deep-rooted native grasses cover the ground. When rain falls, the leaves and stems slow it down. The roots and the dead litter build a spongy layer of soil that acts like, well, like a sponge. Instead of racing off the surface, the water now has time to sink in. It percolates down through the fractured limestone that the hill country is made of. And limestone is full of cracks and channels. The water works its way down, moves sideways underground, and eventually finds its way back out lower down the hill, as a seep, as a spring, as a creek that runs when it hasn't rained in weeks. Grass turns a roof back into a sponge. But that raises a nastier question. If the land had lost its grass, why not just plant grass and walk away? Because he tried, and the first years were brutal. You can't just scatter seed on bare caliche and cedar-shaded ground and expect a meadow. The cedar was still there, drinking. And this is where people get an ecological surprise that sounds backwards. cutting down trees to save water. Every rancher's instinct says trees are good. Trees mean shade, means life, means water. So doesn't clearing them just make the land drier? Not this tree, not here. A mature ash juniper is a water thief with a very specific method. Its dense canopy catches a huge share of the rain before it ever reaches the ground. The drops land on the foliage and evaporate straight back into the sky, never soaking in at all. And what does get through lands on ground so shaded and choked that no grass can grow to hold it. Cedar doesn't just fail to help the water cycle, it hijacks it. So the thickets weren't a sign of a healthy hill. They were part of the reason the springs went dry. Bamberger put crews to work clearing cedar off thousands of acres. By hand, by machine, hillside after hillside. It was slow, expensive, unglamorous labor with nothing pretty to show for it at first, just stumps and bare ground and skeptical neighbors driving past shaking their heads. And here's the trap he'd walked into, the paradox at the center of this whole thing. To hold water, he needed grass. To grow grass, he needed the water to slow down and stay. But bare, degraded land sheds. Water too fast for grass to get started, and the cedar kept stealing the rest. The broken system couldn't fix itself. It was stuck. Every piece it needed to recover depended on a piece it had already lost. Somebody had to break the loop. So he did the only thing left. He couldn't make it rain. So he set out to make the rain stay. Clear the cedar so sunlight and rainfall reach the dirt again. Seed native grasses and protect them, with no cattle hammering the new growth before it could root. And on the bare, eroding ground, slow the runoff wherever he could, so that instead of racing off, the water paused long enough to sink. Give the sponge a head start, then get out of the way. That last part matters, because he wasn't trying to build the water himself. He couldn't. No one can manufacture a spring. All he could do was remove the one thing standing between the rain and the ground and let 100 million years of physics do the rest. For a long time, nothing dramatic happened. Grass came in slowly, soil built up slowly. This is not a story where you flip a switch. And then, one day, on ground that had been dry for as long as anyone alive could remember, there was water, a seep, a wet patch in a drawer where wet patches did not exist. Then it grew. Springs that the old-timers had described but no one had seen began to flow again. Creeks that had been dust started to hold water through the dry season. The property that came with no water became a property with water you could count on. The land had not been dead, it had been waiting. Now, the skeptic in you should be sitting up right now. Couldn't that just be luck? A few wet years? Rain he didn't control? It's a fair question, and it's exactly the right one to ask. Here's the answer. The change wasn't a single wet spring that came and went. It held year after year through droughts that hammered the rest of the region, the kind of droughts that dry up neighbors' tanks while Bamberger's springs kept running. And the pattern wasn't a mystery to the people who study this. Range scientists and hydrologists in Texas have documented the same relationship again and again. Strip the grass and let the cedar take over, and the ground stops recharging. Restore the grass cover, and infiltration climbs. Bamberger hadn't discovered magic. He'd hit the load-bearing point of the whole system, the one lever that moved everything else. The trick was never force, it was leverage, and the proof kept stacking up in ways you could see and count. Where there had been bare dirt and cedar, there were now grasslands. Where the creek had been dust, there were pools. Wildlife that hadn't been seen on that land in a generation started showing up, because water and grass are the bottom of the food chain, and once you rebuild the bottom, the rest climbs back on its own. Bamberger renamed the place Selah, a word meaning to pause and reflect. And Selah, the Bamberger Ranch Preserve, became something the neighbors had stopped laughing about. It became the largest habitat restoration project of its kind on private land in the state, and people started coming to study it. School children, ranchers, university researchers, agency staff. The man who'd been mocked for buying worthless rock was now teaching landowners how to read their own dirt, how to see that the green cedar wasn't wealth and the bare ground wasn't normal. He'd become the loudest voice in the room for the least glamorous idea in ranching. That grass is infrastructure, and it's cheaper than anything you can build. That could be the end of the story. The dead ranch lived, but then it got stranger, because Bamberger didn't stop at water. He decided the land needed its animals back too, and one of his ideas sounds, at first, completely absurd. He built a cave, an artificial cave, engineered out of concrete and covered back over with earth, designed for exactly one purpose, to convince bats to move in. He called it the Chiroptorium. For years it sat mostly empty, and people wondered if the old man had finally overreached. Then the bats came. Mexican free-tailed bats found the man-made cave and colonized it, and today it holds them by the many thousands, a functioning bat colony that exists because someone decided to build a home and wait. Those bats pour out at dusk and eat tons of insects, including crop pests over the surrounding countryside. He'd built wildlife infrastructure the way he'd rebuilt the water, by creating the condition, then stepping back. And there was one more. Bamberger threw his land and his money behind saving the Texas snowbell, one of the rarest plants in the state, a small tree so close to vanishing that only a handful were known in the wild. Selah became a place where it was propagated and planted out, pulling a species back from the very edge. The water came back, and it dragged a whole community of living things back with it: plants, birds, bats, animals he'd never set out to save. Rebuild the bottom, and things you weren't even looking for come home. Now, the honest part, because this is not a miracle, and I won't sell it as one. What worked at Selah worked because the conditions were right. 30 inches of rain a year, not 5. Fractured limestone underneath that could actually store and move the water once it got in. Grass species that belonged there. Enough money and enough years, decades, not seasons, to do the slow work and wait out the results. And a willingness to stop grazing the land into the ground. Take away any of those, and the outcome changes. You can't chainsaw cedar off a true desert and expect a spring. This was leverage applied to the right point, in the right place, with patience most people don't have. That's not a weakness in the story, it's the reason it's true. But the core of it travels anywhere. The land wasn't broken because the sky quit. It was broken because the ground had lost the ability to keep what the sky gave it. And the fix for that wasn't bigger, it was older. Think about what almost everyone got wrong at the start. They looked at a dry ranch and saw a water problem, so they reached for drills and tanks and dollars, the machines. Bamberger looked at the same ranch and saw a grass problem wearing a water problem's clothes. He didn't find water, he stopped losing it. So the next time you drive past a scrubby, cedar-choked hillside and think that's just what Texas looks like, remember that it isn't. That's not the natural state. That's the damaged one. Somewhere under that thicket is a hill that used to hold its rain and forgot how, because we took away the one thing it needed and then decided the ruin was normal. J. David Bamberger died in 2020 in his 90s on the land he'd spent half a century bringing back. He'd turned the worst ranch in the county into a living argument. And the argument was simple enough to fit in a sentence he said 1,000 ways. It was always the grass. He didn't buy water, he didn't engineer it, he didn't outmuscle the drought with money, even though he had plenty. He just gave the land back the one worker it had been missing, and then he got out of the way and let it do the job it had always known how to do. The cheapest infrastructure on that whole ranch turned out to be alive.